At 7 minutes past midnight on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. My mother's voice dripped with honey, asking where I was, claiming the whole family was waiting. I stood frozen outside a law firm, clutching a red envelope worth $11 million. It is funny, really, for once, they did not forget me. They simply forgot that I, too, am capable of remembering. My name is Naomi Powell, and for the last decade of my life, I have been a ghost in my own family history, standing on the pavement outside the heavy oak doors of the law firm in St. Paul, Minnesota. The cold was not just a weather condition, it was a physical assault. The wind coming off the river cut right through my wool coat, biting at the exposed skin of my neck, but I did not button it up. I needed the cold. I needed the sharp, stinging reality of the freezing air to remind me that I was actually awake, that the piece of paper inside the red envelope in my hand was real, and that the life I had known for 34 years had just been incinerated by a single signature. It was 7 minutes past midnight on December 25th, technically Christmas Day, though the world still felt like the dark, exhausted end of Christmas Eve. The streetlights hummed overhead, casting long orange shadows against the dirty snowbanks piled high on the curb. The city was silent, that specific, heavy silence that falls when families are tucked away inside, performing their rituals of togetherness. Then, the vibration against my thigh shattered the quiet. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was almost blinding in the dark. The name flashing on the display was one I had not seen pop up on a holiday in years. Mother. I stared at the name, watching it pulse. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but morbid curiosity, that old toxic habit of seeking approval I thought I had buried, made me slide the bar to answer. I did not say a word. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the static of the connection, my breath pluming out in white clouds before me. Naomi. Her voice was unrecognizable, not because it sounded different, but because of the tone. It was warm. It was dripping with a sugary, cloying sweetness that I had only ever heard her use with her friends from the country club or, on rare occasions, my younger brother, Logan. It was a voice that did not belong to the mother who usually spoke to me in sighs and veiled criticisms. Naomi, darling, where are you? She asked. The worry in her voice pitched perfectly, like a line delivered in a soap opera. We are all waiting for you. The turkey is not even carved yet. We cannot start without you. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, bitter and sharp as bile, waiting for me. The concept was so absurd, it was almost comedy. For the past 6 years, their Christmas dinner had started promptly at 6 in the evening. If I was not there, nobody noticed. If I was there, I was usually relegated to the folding chair at the corner of the table, the one that sat a little lower than the others, creating a subtle physical reminder of my standing in the Powell hierarchy. They were not waiting for me. They were waiting for what I was holding. I looked down at the envelope in my left hand. It was a heavy linen stock, dyed a deep, blood red. The wax seal on the back had been broken, the red crumbs of it still clinging to the paper fibers. On the front, in elegant, unwavering calligraphy, were the words, Estate of Eleanor Wren, Final Distribution. Eleanor was the only one who had ever truly seen me, and now, even in death, she was the only one making sure I was seen by everyone else. I did not answer my mother. I could hear the background noise on her end of the line. The clinking of crystal glasses, the low murmur of jazz music, the hearty, booming laugh of my father. It sounded like a party. It sounded like a celebration, and I knew, with the instinct of a hunted animal, that the celebration had stopped the moment they realized the mistake they had made. Naomi. Are you there? The sweetness was fraying at the edges now, revealing the steel wire of impatience underneath. Just come home. We have a present for you. A big one. I ended the call. My finger hit the red icon with a satisfying tap. I did not block the number. Not yet. I wanted to see them try. I wanted to watch the desperation mount. For years, the Powell family tradition regarding me had been one of benign neglect. I was the piece of furniture they forgot to dust. The appointment they forgot to write down. On Christmas. This forgetfulness turned into a spectator sport. There was always an excuse. They forgot to tell me the time of the dinner changed. They forgot to set a place at the table and had to scramble to find a plate from the kitchen. Usually one that did not match the fine china. They forgot to put my name on the stocking list. But tonight, the dynamic had shifted. The tectonic plates of our family geology had slammed together, and the earthquake was just beginning. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from my banking app. I stared at the screen, my eyes watering from the wind. The banner notification was simple, clinical, and utterly life-altering. Deposit received. I unlocked the phone and opened the app. The Face ID scan took a second, spinning as it recognized me in the dim light. Then, the balance screen loaded. I had been living paycheck to paycheck for most of my adult life, working as a compliance officer at a mid-level firm, driving a car that rattled when it went over 60 miles an hour. I knew what my balance usually looked like. 3 digits, maybe 4 if I had just been paid and had not paid rent yet. Tonight, the number stretched across the screen, so long it almost needed a second line. $11 million. It was not a glitch. It was not a pending transaction. It was posted. Available funds, $11 million. The air in my lungs felt thin. I looked up at the brick facade of the law office. Eleanor, my great-aunt Eleanor, the woman who wore thrift store sweaters and drove a 20-year-old sedan, the woman my parents sneered at for being simple and out of touch. She had been sitting on an empire, and she had bypassed everyone, my father, my mother, my golden boy brother Logan, to drop the entire weight of it into my lap. But it was not just the money. Money I could handle. It was the message that came with it. My phone vibrated again, a long, angry buzz indicating a voicemail. It was from my father. I could tell by the contact photo, a picture of him standing next to his Porsche, looking tanned and important. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear, turning my back to the wind. Naomi. His voice boomed, stripped of the fake warmth my mother had tried to employ. We know you spoke to the executor. We know about the arrangement. Now, listen to me. This is a family matter. We do not air our laundry, and we certainly do not hoard resources. If you are a good person, Naomi, if you are the daughter we raised you to be, you will know that this is a mistake. You will know to share. Call me back. Immediately. The recording ended with a sharp click. If you are a good person, that was the hook they always used. That was the weapon. For 34 years. Being a good person meant being a doormat. It meant smiling when they forgot my birthday. It meant apologizing when they bumped into me. It meant making myself smaller so Logan could have more room to shine. Being good meant being silent. I looked at the red envelope again. Inside, along with the check that had just cleared, was a letter. I had read it in the lawyer's office, sitting in a leather chair that smelled of mahogany and old tobacco. I had read it 3 times, tears blurring the ink, until the words were burned into my retinas. Eleanor had known. She had watched from her quiet corner in Duluth, noting every slight, every insult, every moment I was left behind. They remember me now. I whispered to the empty street, my breath fogged in front of me. They remember me because the money appeared. I gripped the phone tighter, but I remember everything from when they disappeared. I remembered the Christmas I spent eating instant noodles in a dorm room because they went to Aspen and forgot to book me a ticket until the flights were sold out. I remembered the year I sat in the hallway of their house for 3 hours waiting for them to finish a private photo shoot I was not invited to. I remembered the silence, the absolute, crushing silence of being unessential. Now, the silence was gone. My phone was lighting up like a slot machine. Texts from Logan, missed calls from my mother, another voicemail from my father. They were frantic. They were terrified. They should be. I was about to hail a cab, to go back to my small apartment on the other side of the city, when a new message popped up at the top of my screen. It was not from my family. It was from the lawyer I had just left. Mr. Vance. I tapped it open. The message was short, devoid of professional pleasantries. and chilling enough to make the cold night feel tropical by comparison. Do not go home. Do not go to your apartment. They are planning something dirty. I just got a call from their counsel. Go to a hotel. Pay cash. I stared at the text. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, bird-like rhythm. Something dirty. That could mean anything with the Powells. A competency hearing. A restraining order based on fabricated evidence. A surprise intervention to prove I was mentally unstable and therefore unfit to manage the inheritance. I looked down the street. The darkness seemed deeper now, the shadows stretching out like grasping fingers. The $11 million in my account suddenly felt less like a lottery win and more like a target painted on my back. I shoved the red envelope inside my coat. Pressing it against my chest, I turned my collar up against the wind. I was not going home. I was not going to their dinner. I walked toward the main avenue, my boots crunching loudly on the frozen grit of the sidewalk. They wanted me to share. They wanted the good daughter, the one who forgave and forgot. But that daughter froze to death an hour ago. The woman walking away from the law firm had $11 million, a red envelope full of secrets, and a memory that was just beginning to thaw. I raised my hand to hail a passing taxi. The yellow light of the cab was the only warmth in the entire city. As I climbed in, I cast one last look at my phone. Another call from Mother. I let it ring. Let them wait. I had been waiting for 34 years. They could wait for a few minutes, or a few months, to the Hyatt. I told the driver, and take the long way. As the car pulled away, sliding slightly on the ice, I settled back into the seat. The war had started at 7 minutes past midnight, and for the first time in the history of the Powell family, I was the one holding the ammunition. The room in the Hyatt was suffocatingly expensive. The sheets were that crisp, heavy cotton that felt like sleeping inside a cloud, and the minibar was stocked with spirits that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, the red envelope resting on the nightstand under the glow of the lamp. I should have been sleeping. The adrenaline from the $11 million and the frantic voicemails should have exhausted me into a coma. Instead, I was wide awake, staring at the beige wall, remembering. Memory is a funny thing. My parents liked to treat it like a whiteboard, something they could wipe clean and rewrite whenever the narrative did not suit them. But my memory was different. My memory was carved in stone. It was a tally sheet, etched with the precision of a prisoner marking days on a cell wall. The world thinks of child neglect as dirty faces and empty fridges. They think of bruises and screaming matches. In the Powell house, neglect was beautifully packaged. It was wrapped in gold foil and tied with a silk ribbon. It was quiet. It was polite. It was the slow, systematic erasure of a person, done with a smile. It started, or at least the part I remember vividly started, when I was 12 years old. That Christmas stands out because it was the year I still believed in the magic of it. I still believed that if I was good enough, quiet enough, and helpful enough, I would earn my seat at the table. I had spent weeks making paper snowflakes to tape to the windows. I had helped the housekeeper polish the silver until my fingers smelled like tarnish and chemical paste. On Christmas Eve, I fell asleep under the massive Douglas fir tree in the living room. The lights were twinkling, casting multicolored shadows on the ceiling. I wanted to be there when Santa came. I wanted to see the look on my parents' faces when they saw the perfectly arranged living room. I curled up on the rug, hugging a throw pillow, and drifted off. When I woke up, the room was bright with harsh winter sunlight. The silence was absolute. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The tree was there, but the base of it was a disaster zone of torn wrapping paper and empty boxes. The presents were gone, all of them. The expensive remote-controlled car Logan had screamed for, the jewelry boxes for my mother, the golf clubs for my father. Everything had been opened, ravaged, and abandoned. I stood up, my 12-year-old heart hammering a strange, hollow rhythm against my ribs. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty. The breakfast dishes were in the sink plates smeared with syrup and egg yolks. 3 plates, on the granite island, There was a sticky note attached to a Tupperware container. Naomi, we did not want to wake you. Logan was so excited to try out his new snowmobile at the cabin. We will be back tomorrow. There is ham in the fridge. Merry Christmas. They had gone to the lake house, a 3-hour drive away, and they had left me on the rug. I remember standing there, the silence of the big, empty house pressing in on my ears like water. I did not cry. That was the first lesson. Crying implies you are surprised. Crying implies you expected better. I just opened the Tupperware. It was leftover green bean casserole, cold and congealed. I ate it standing up at the counter, staring at the cheerful holiday card from the neighbors taped to the fridge. That year, I learned that I was not a participant in the holiday. I was part of the set dressing. By the time I was 15, the forgetting had evolved from accidental oversight to logistical convenience. That year, the entire extended family was gathering at my aunt's estate in Vermont. It was the event of the season. My mother had bought 3 different outfits for the weekend. My father had spent days on the phone coordinating the travel. We were taking 2 cars because of the amount of luggage my mother insisted on bringing. I was packed 3 days early. My suitcase was by the door. On the morning of departure, the driveway was a chaotic symphony of slamming trunks and shouting voices. My father was barking orders about the traffic on the interstate. My mother was fussing over Logan's coat, making sure he was warm enough. I was in the kitchen, filling a travel mug with coffee for my father, trying to be useful, trying to be the good daughter. I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing, then the roar of engines. I ran to the window, the travel mug burning my hand. I watched the taillights of my father's SUV and my mother's sedan disappear down the long, winding driveway. They were gone. I stood there for 10 minutes, convincing myself they were just turning the cars around, convincing myself they were parking on the street to wait for me. But 10 minutes turned into 20, then an hour. I called my mother's cell phone, straight to voicemail. I called my father, straight to voicemail. 4 hours later, the house phone rang. I snatched it up, desperate for the apology, for the frantic promise that they were turning back. "Oh, Naomi, thank God," my mother said, her voice breathless and annoyed. "We are halfway through New York and realized we left your father's garment bag in the hall closet. Can you check if it is there?" I stared at the wall. "You left me," I said. My voice was small, pathetic. Silence on the line. Then a sigh. A heavy, dramatic sigh that sounded like tearing fabric. "Oh, stop it, Naomi. We took 2 cars. Your father thought you were with me. I thought you were with him. It was a simple miscommunication. Do not be dramatic." "But are you coming back?" I asked. "Naomi, look at the time," she snapped. "We cannot turn around now. We will miss the dinner reservation. Just stay there. Keep an eye on the house. The alarm system has been acting up anyway. It is better this way. You hate these parties regardless." She hung up. That night, 15 years old, and entirely alone in a house that was too big and too cold, I made myself a packet of instant noodles. I sat in the dark living room and watched the neighbors' fireworks through the bay window. Every explosion of color in the sky felt like a mockery. I was the watchdog. I was the caretaker. I was the thing they left behind to ensure the house did not burn down while they went out to live. 2 years later, when I was 17, the pretense dropped completely. They did not even pretend to forget me that year. It was a transaction. My father came into my room 2 days before Christmas. He sat on the edge of my bed, looking solemn, the way he did when he was about to deliver bad news to a client. "Naomi," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder, "we have a very important business dinner on Christmas Eve. It is critical for the firm, investors from Japan. Very traditional, no children allowed." I nodded, feeling the familiar weight settling in my stomach. "Okay, so, we need you to hold down the fort," he continued, smiling that winning smile that charmed juries and zoning boards. "Logan is going to stay with his friend Tyler, but we need someone here, for the security. And the dog gets anxious with the fireworks. You understand, right? You are the responsible one." I understood. I was the responsible one. That was my currency. That was the only way I could buy their affection. So I stayed. I ordered a pizza. I watched bad television. I fed the dog. The next day, I was scrolling through social media, and I saw it. It was a photo posted by one of the investors, a man who was allegedly very traditional, but in the photo, he was wearing a Santa hat and holding a martini glass, and in the background, clear as day, were my parents. They were not at a business dinner. They were at the country club's annual Christmas Eve gala, and sitting right next to my father, wearing a tuxedo and laughing at something the investor was saying, was Logan. There was no children rule. There was just a no Naomi rule. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that night, a frost that never really melted. They did not leave me behind because of logistics. They did not leave me behind for business. They left me behind because I was an anchor. I was the dull, serious, responsible daughter who did not know how to sparkle at parties. I was the buzzkill. Logan was the golden boy, the heir apparent, the one who reflected their glory back at them. I was just the backstage crew. By the time I was 21, I had stopped trying to go home. I was in my final year of university, working 2 jobs to pay for the tuition that my parents forgot to send checks for on time. I was alone in my dorm room on Christmas morning. The heating in the building was patchy, and I was wrapped in 3 blankets. I dialed my parents on FaceTime. I just wanted to say hello. I just wanted to see their faces, to pretend for 5 minutes that we were a normal family. The call connected. The image was blurry, pixelated. I could see palm trees in the background. They were in Maui. "Hi," I said, forcing a cheerfulness I did not feel. "Merry Christmas, Naomi." My mother's voice was garbled. "We cannot hear you. The Wi-Fi at the resort is terrible." "Hello, I can hear you fine," I said. "Mom. Dad." "You are breaking up," she shouted, looking off camera. "Logan, stop splashing Naomi. We have to go. The signal is awful. We will call you when we get back to the mainland." The screen went black. Connection failed. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark glass of the iPad. 5 minutes later, a notification popped up on my phone. My cousin had posted a story on Instagram. It was a video. It was my parents and Logan, sitting at a pristine white table overlooking the ocean. The sun was shining. They were laughing. My mother was holding her phone up, showing something on the screen to my father. She is so needy. I heard my mother's voice, crystal clear in the video. She calls it the worst times. God, just let us enjoy the vacation. My father laughed. He took a sip of his drink. "She will be fine. She is tough, like a cockroach." And Logan, my golden brother. He just smirked and went back to his lobster. That was the moment the last thread snapped. I realized then that my pain was not a tragedy to them. It was an inconvenience. My existence was a mild annoyance that interrupted their leisure time. I reached into my desk drawer that day and pulled out a notebook. It was a plain black moleskin journal. I opened it to the first blank page and wrote the date. December 25th. They are in Maui. They pretended the connection died so they did not have to talk to me. Mom called me needy. Dad called me a cockroach. It became a ritual. Every Christmas, while the rest of the world was opening presents and drinking eggnog, I would sit down and write. I titled the entries the same way every year, "How They Forgot Me Today." I wrote down the excuses. I wrote down the lies. I wrote down the exact cost of the gifts they gave Logan versus the gift cards they mailed to me, usually to stores I never shopped at, clearly regifted from business partners. I wrote it all down because I knew, deep down, that one day they would try to rewrite history. One day, they would try to tell me that we were a happy family, that they loved us both equally, that I was imagining the cold. I filled 3 notebooks over the years. They were my secret, my proof of life. I thought I was used to it. I thought I had built a shell hard enough to withstand the yearly erosion of my dignity. I accepted my role. I was the good one, the one who did not make a scene, the one who absorbed the hurt so the family atmosphere remained pristine. But then Eleanor Wren came into the picture. I met her at a funeral for a distant relative nobody really cared about. She was sitting in the back row, a tiny woman with sharp, bird-like eyes, and a coat that had seen better decades. While my parents were busy networking near the casket, she walked up to me. "You have your grandmother's chin," she said, her voice raspy like dry leaves. "And you have your father's eyes, but you do not have their blindness." I did not know what she meant then, but she started watching me. She saw the way I carried the coats while my mother posed for pictures. She saw the way I drove the designated driver car while Logan got drunk in the back seat. She saw the silence that surrounded me even when the room was full. She saw the invisible girl, and unlike everyone else, Eleanor Wren did not look away. I lay back on the Hyatt pillows, the memory of her sharp gaze cutting through the fog of the past. The red envelope on the nightstand seemed to pulse in the dark. For 20 years, the Powells had forgotten me. They had trained me to be invisible. They had trained me to be silent. But they forgot one crucial thing about people who are forced to live in the shadows. We see everything. And we write it all down. If my parents were the kind of people who sucked the air out of a room, Eleanor Wren was the kind who opened a window. She was my great-aunt, technically my grandfather's younger sister, but titles never really mattered with Eleanor. She lived in Duluth, a port city on Lake Superior that seemed to exist in a perpetual state of winter. Her house was a small, defiant bungalow perched on a hill, overlooking the gray, churning water of the lake. It smelled of cedar wood, black tea, and the sharp, metallic scent of old coins. While the rest of the Powell family measured their worth in square footage and horsepower, Eleanor measured hers in silence and observation. She was a woman of few words, but every sentence she spoke was a scalpel, cutting away the fat to reveal the bone underneath. She was also the only person in the world who remembered me. It was not a loud remembrance. There were no grand gestures or public displays. It was a quiet, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Every year, in the first week of December, a card would arrive in my mailbox. It was never a generic store-bought card with glittery snowmen or pre-printed platitudes. It was always a thick, cream-colored card, and inside, in her spidery, unwavering handwriting, she would write the same 3 words, "I see you," not "Merry Christmas," not "Happy Holidays," just "I see you." When I was younger, I did not understand the weight of those words. I thought it was just an eccentricity of an old woman living alone with her books. But as the years of my parents' neglect piled up, those 3 words became the only oxygen I had. They were a validation of my existence. They meant that I was not a ghost. I was solid. I was visible to someone. The real shift in our relationship happened when I was 27. I was working as a glorified administrative assistant at my father's friend's firm, a job my father had generously arranged for me, which mostly involved getting coffee and being the target of his friend's temper. I was living in a shoebox apartment, drowning in student loans that my parents had promised to help with, but somehow never got around to paying. I had driven up to Duluth to check on Eleanor. My parents had asked me to go, not out of concern, but because they had heard rumors that Eleanor's health was declining, and they wanted an update on the asset, as my father called her house. I found Eleanor in her garden, wrapping burlap around her rose bushes to protect them from the coming frost. She looked frail, her frame swallowed by a heavy wool coat, but her eyes were bright and hard. I started to help her, my hands working automatically to tie the twine. We worked in silence for 20 minutes, the wind whipping off the lake and stinging our cheeks. "You are doing it again," she said suddenly. I looked up, startled. "Doing what? Working for people who do not pay you," she said. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes on the knot she was tying. "You are wrapping my roses. You drove 3 hours to get here. You brought groceries. And I know for a fact your father did not give you gas money. It is fine." "Eleanor," I said, falling into my habitual defense, "I wanted to come." She turned to me then, dropping the twine. She reached out and took my face in her gloved hands. Her leather gloves were cold, but her touch was grounding. "Naomi, listen to me. You have a sickness. It is not a disease of the body. It is a disease of the spirit. You think that if you work hard enough for people who do not care about you, Eventually, they will send you a bill for your love. You think you can earn your way into their hearts. I felt tears prick my eyes. It is not like that. It is exactly like that, she countered sternly. You are the compliance officer of your own abuse. You manage the regulations. You smooth over the violations. And you ensure the family enterprise of hurting you keeps running efficiently. She let go of my face and walked back toward the house. Come inside. I made tea. And bring your resume. I followed her, confused. My resume. We are going to fix this, she called back over her shoulder. That afternoon. Eleanor made 3 phone calls. I did not know who she was calling, but her voice changed when she spoke to them. It became authoritative, commanding, a tone I had never heard her use. 2 weeks later, I had an interview at Redwood Compliance Group. It was a real firm, with real career tracks, completely unconnected to my father's sphere of influence. I got the job. For the first time in my life, I had a salary that allowed me to breathe. I had health insurance. I had autonomy. Eleanor had given me the keys to my own life. For the next 7 years, I became her primary caretaker. It was not a burden. It was a sanctuary. I spent my weekends driving up to Duluth. I learned the rhythm of her life. I learned which pills she needed to take with food and which ones made her dizzy. I learned how to fix the drafty window in the attic and how to navigate the complex bureaucracy of her medical insurance. I did it because I loved her. I did it because, in that small house smelling of cedar, I was not the disappointment. I was Naomi. Just Naomi. My family, on the other hand, treated Eleanor like a museum exhibit they were waiting to inherit. They would visit once or twice a year, usually in the summer when the weather was nice. They would roll up in my father's luxury SUV, stepping out in designer clothes that looked ridiculous against the rugged backdrop of the North Shore. They would stay for exactly 45 minutes. My mother would bring a potted orchid, something totally unsuitable for the climate, and place it on the table. My father would wander around the property, tapping on the walls, talking loudly about zoning potential and market value. Logan would sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up to say hello. They would take a photo. That was the most important part. My mother would arrange us, everyone smile. Look like you love each other. They would post it on Facebook with captions like, "Spending quality time with our beloved Aunt Eleanor. Family is everything." Then they would leave. As soon as the taillights disappeared, Eleanor would let out a long breath and ask me to move the orchid to the compost bin. They are vultures. Naomi. She said to me one evening, about 6 months before she died, we were sitting on her porch, wrapped in blankets, watching a storm roll in over the lake. They are just busy, I said automatically. Stop it, she snapped. Do not defend them to me. I see them. I see what they are doing. She took a sip of her tea, her hand trembling slightly. The Parkinson's was getting worse, though she refused to admit it. Your father called me last week. She said. I stiffened. What did he want? He wanted to know if I would be interested in investing in a new development project, something under Powell and Pine Holdings. He called it a guaranteed return. My stomach dropped. I knew Powell and Pine was my father's real estate venture, but I knew very little about the inner workings. I just knew they always seemed to be expanding, always buying new land, always leveraging one asset to buy another. What did you say? I asked. I told him I'm old. Not senile, Eleanor said, a dry chuckle escaping her lips. I told him I do not invest in houses built on sand. She turned to look at me, her eyes sharp in the twilight. Naomi, there is something wrong with that company. I have been watching the public filings. I have a friend who used to work in the county clerk's office. The numbers do not add up. They are moving money around like a shell game. I frowned. Dad is flashy, but he is not a criminal. Desperation makes criminals out of honest men, and your father was never an honest man to begin with, Eleanor said. She reached out and gripped my hand. Listen to me. When I go, it is going to get ugly. They are counting on my money to plug a hole in their ship. I have done the math. They are overextended. I did not want to think about her dying. Eleanor, please, you are fine. I am dying. Naomi, she said bluntly, We do not have time for polite fictions." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than the thunder rolling in the distance. "They forget you, Naomi. They leave you in the cold. Do you know why I look down at my lap? Because I am not interesting. Because I am not successful like Logan." "No," she hissed. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Because they think you have no cost." I looked up at her. "They think you are free." She continued. "They think your loyalty, your silence, your pain, it is all free. They think they can take it and never pay a cent. They think you are a natural resource that will never run out." She let go of my hand and leaned back, looking out at the dark water. "But everything has a cost, Naomi, and the bill is coming due." I did not understand the full scope of what she meant then. I thought she was speaking metaphorically. I thought she was just an angry old woman trying to protect me. I did not know she was already playing a game of chess that my parents did not even know had started. When Eleanor died in mid-November, it was quick, a stroke in her sleep. I was the one who found her. I was the one who called the coroner. I was the one who picked out the dress she was buried in. My parents and Logan flew in for the funeral. They wore black cashmere. They cried in the front row. My father gave a eulogy that was 80% about himself and 20% about how much Eleanor had inspired his business acumen. At the reception afterward, my mother pulled me aside. Her eyes were dry, but she was dabbing them with a handkerchief for effect. "Did she say anything to you?" she whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "About the will?" "No," I lied. "Well, it does not matter," my mother said, smoothing her skirt. "The lawyer said the reading is in December. It will be a nice little bonus for Christmas. We can finally redo the kitchen in the Aspen house." She patted my arm. "You look tired. Naomi, you should really wear more concealer. You look like a ghost." I watched her walk away to charm the vicar. A ghost. That was what they saw. A ghost who would haunt the edges of their life, demanding nothing, accepting the scraps. But as I stood there in the cold church hall, I remembered Eleanor's voice. "They think you have no cost." I touched the pocket of my blazer, where I had kept the last card she ever sent me. It had arrived 3 days before she died. "I see you." And because she saw me, she had made sure that when the time came, everyone else would have no choice but to see me too. I did not know then about the red envelope. I did not know about the $11 million. I did not know about the conditions she had set in stone. All I knew was that the woman who had been my shield was gone, and I was left alone on the battlefield. Or so I thought. Turning over in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling of the Hyatt, I realized Eleanor had not left me defenseless. She had left me a weapon. She had left me the one thing the Powell family respected more than blood, more than love, more than God. She had left me leverage. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Highlight Tower in downtown St. Paul took exactly 45 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime suspended in a vacuum. I was wearing my work clothes, a sensible gray skirt suit that I had bought on sale at Macy's 3 years ago, and my boots were still damp from the slush outside. Mr. Vance, Eleanor's attorney, had emailed me the time and location directly. He had been specific about the time, 9 o'clock in the morning on December 23rd. My parents had not mentioned it. In fact, when I had spoken to my mother 2 days prior, she had vaguely mentioned that the administrative business regarding Eleanor's estate would be handled sometime in the new year. When the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, I understood why. They were already there. The reception area of the law firm was sleek, all glass and polished chrome, looking more like a tech startup than a place where dead people's wishes were read. And sitting on the plush leather sofas were my parents and Logan. They looked like they were attending a coronation. My father was wearing his navy bespoke suit, the one he saved for closing million-dollar commercial deals. His tie was a deep, aggressive crimson. My mother was in a Chanel textured jacket, her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde perfection, diamonds glinting at her ears, and Logan sat between them, tapping on his phone, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, looking bored and entitled. They stopped talking the moment they saw me. "Naomi," my mother said, her voice tight. The smile she plastered on her face did not reach her eyes. "What are you doing here? We thought you were working. We were going to stop by and tell you the details later. We did not want you to have to take time off." I looked at the receptionist, then back at them. "Mr. Vance sent me a calendar invite," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. My father's jaw tightened. He shot a look at the closed conference room doors. "Miscommunication," he grunted, checking his Rolex. "Well, since you are here, grab a seat. Try not to drip on the upholstery." Before I could respond, the double doors opened. Mr. Vance appeared. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed and found them all boring. "Please, come in," he said, gesturing to the long mahogany table. My parents swept in first, claiming the seats at the head of the table. Logan slumped into a chair on their right. I took the seat on the left, facing them. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a tribunal. Mr. Vance sat at the head, opened a thick file folder, and adjusted his glasses. He did not offer condolences. He did not offer water. He just looked at us, one by one. Eleanor Wren was a woman of precise intent. He began, his voice dry. She updated her last will and testament 6 months ago. She was sound of mind and body, and the execution of this document was video recorded to ensure there would be no ambiguity regarding her capacity. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Cut to the chase, Vance. We know the portfolio, the house in Duluth, the retirement accounts. We just need the paperwork to transfer the assets into the family trust so we can manage the tax liability." Mr. Vance looked at my father over the rim of his glasses. "There is no family trust mentioned in this document, Mr. Powell." The room went deadly silent. My mother laughed. A nervous, tinkling sound. "I think there is a mistake," Eleanor always said. Mr. Vance held up a hand. "I will read the distribution of assets now. Please hold your questions until the end." He looked down at the paper. "To my nephew, Robert Powell, and his wife, Cynthia, I leave the contents of my attic, specifically, the photo albums and letters that document our family history. Perhaps if you look at them, you will remember where you came from." My father's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. "The attic," he sputtered. "That is it, old paper. To my grandnephew." "Logan?" Vance continued, ignoring the outburst. "I leave my 1998 Subaru Legacy. It has 140,000 miles on it. It requires maintenance, attention, and care. I hope you learn how to give it." Logan let out a sharp, incredulous bark of laughter. "You are joking. A 20-year-old beater, I drive a Range Rover." Mr. Vance turned the page. The sound of the paper turning was the loudest thing in the room, and to my grandniece, Naomi Powell. I held my breath. I expected a small sum, maybe enough to pay off my student loans, maybe the house in Duluth. "I leave the remainder of my estate, including my investment portfolio, the Duluth property, and the liquidity obtained from the sale of my patent rights in 1992, which have been held in a blind trust gathering compound interest for 30 years. "Patent rights," my father whispered. "What patent rights?" "The total value of the liquid assets," Vance read, his voice unwavering, "is $11,420,000 after taxes." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. $11 million. My mother made a sound like a deflating balloon. My father looked as if he had been struck in the chest with a sledgehammer. Logan just sat there, his mouth slightly open. The smirk wiped clean from his face. I stared at the table, my vision blurring. $11 million. Eleanor had been sitting on a fortune, a literal fortune, and she had lived in drafty flannels and driven that old Subaru. "There is more," Vance said. He looked directly at my parents. "I also leave Naomi full control and sole trusteeship of the Eleanor Wren Charitable Foundation, funded with an additional $2 million. The purpose of this foundation is to support families in financial crisis." My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is preposterous." Eleanor was senile. She was manipulated. Naomi has been up there every weekend for years. She obviously coerced her Mr. Vance's eyes snapped to my father. I would be very careful with your next words. Mr. Powell, as I said, the signing was recorded. Eleanor was sharp as a tack, and she anticipated this exact reaction. He looked back at the document. Condition number 1. Vance read, "The distribution of these funds is at the sole discretion of Naomi Powell. There is no mandatory requirement for her to share, loan, or gift any portion of this inheritance to any family member. It is hers, entirely." My mother let out a sob. It was a theatrical, wailing sound. Naomi. How could you? We are family. Your father's business. We have liquidity issues right now. You know that. You are going to let us starve. You are going to put your own parents out on the street while you sit on millions. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. Her fingers were cold and claw-like. Naomi, baby, tell him we are a team. I pulled my hand back. I did not say a word. I just watched her perform. Condition number 2, Vance said, raising his voice slightly to cut through my mother's performance. And this is the most important clause. Listen closely. He waited until my father stopped glaring and looked at him. If any beneficiary, specifically Robert, Cynthia, or Logan Powell, contests this will, or if there is any evidence of harassment, coercion, or pressure placed upon Naomi Powell to redistribute these funds, they will be immediately and permanently disqualified from receiving any potential grants or aid from the Eleanor Wren Charitable Foundation. Furthermore, if such pressure is documented, the entire estate will be frozen and donated to the immense benefit of the Cat Fanciers Association of America. Vance closed the folder. So, he said, leaning back, you can ask Naomi nicely. You can hope she is generous, but if you try to force her, if you sue her, or if you bully her, you get nothing, and you ensure the cats of America eat very well. Logan stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. This is insane. She is a secretary. She does not know how to manage money like that. She will blow it on nothing. She does not deserve this. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this. You poisoned the old hag against us. You played the martyr, scrubbing her floors, just waiting for the payout. I looked at my brother. For the first time, I saw him not as the golden boy, but as a stunted, angry child in a man's suit. I did not play anything. Logan, I said quietly, I just showed up. You should try it sometime. My father stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He regained his composure, the mask sliding back into place. But his eyes were cold. Dead sharks. We will contest this, he said to Vance. Competency hearing, undue influence. We will tie this up in court for years. She will not see a dime. Mr. Vance reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick, red envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Eleanor prepared for that too. Vance said. He slid the envelope across the mahogany table toward me. It stopped inches from my hand. Estate of Eleanor Wren. Final distribution. Inside this envelope, Vance said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost warning tone, are supplementary documents. Eleanor instructed me to give this to Naomi immediately after the reading. My father stared at the envelope. What is in it? Vance looked at my father, then at me. Leverage. Mr. Powell. Eleanor called it an insurance policy. She instructed that Naomi is to open it only if there is a dispute, if you accept the will as written. Naomi never has to open it. If you choose to fight well, she opens it, and whatever is inside becomes public record. My father stared at the red envelope. He looked at the seal. He looked at me. I saw a flicker of genuine fear behind his eyes, something I had never seen in 34 years. He knew Eleanor. He knew she was smarter than him, and he knew that if she had kept a patent secret for 30 years, she had likely kept other things secret too. I reached out and placed my hand on the envelope. The paper was cool and textured. I felt a surge of power that was intoxicating. I picked it up. My mother was wiping her eyes, her mascara surprisingly intact. Naomi, be reasonable. We are your family. We love you. We just want what is best for everyone. I stood up. My legs felt steady, strong. I think Eleanor knew exactly what was best for everyone. I put the envelope in my bag. I turned to Mr. Vance. Thank you. I will be in touch regarding the transfer instructions. I walked toward the door. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the heat of their rage. As I reached for the handle, my father spoke. He did not shout. He did not bluster. He spoke in a low, soft whisper that carried across the room like a draft of freezing air. If you walk out that door with that money, Naomi, you are dead to us. I stopped. I did not turn around. I was dead to you when I was 12. Dad, I said, I was dead to you when I was 15, and you left me in a house alone. I was dead to you every Christmas you forgot to set a place for me. I gripped the door handle. The only difference is that now, I am a very rich ghost. I opened the door. So you choose war, my father hissed. I stepped out into the hallway and let the door close behind me, cutting off the sight of them. I walked to the elevator, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. War. He had called it war. I pressed the button for the lobby. I touched the red envelope through the leather of my bag. My father thought this was the start of the war. He thought he was the general, marshalling his troops. He was wrong. The war had been going on for decades. I had just been the only one unarmed. Now, I had a nuclear weapon in my purse. The elevator arrived with a cheerful ding. I stepped inside, and as the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. I did not look like a secretary. I did not look like a victim. I looked like Eleanor. I hit the button for the ground floor. The descent began. $11 million, a red envelope, and a family that had just declared open season on their own daughter. Bring it on, I whispered to the empty car. I checked my watch. It was 10:15 in the morning. I had a lot to do before Christmas, and the first thing on my list was to disappear before they could figure out how to stop me. The hours following the will reading were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My phone became a battlefield, vibrating so constantly against the nightstand of my hotel room that I eventually had to bury it under a pillow. At first, the strategy was emotional blackmail. My mother sent a barrage of texts, each one curated to strike a specific chord of guilt. We are so worried about you. Darling, you looked so manic today. Please just come home so we can take care of you. Christmas is about forgiveness. Naomi, do not let money poison your soul. Your father is crying. I have never seen him cry. You are breaking his heart. I read them with a detached fascination, like a scientist observing bacteria under a microscope. My father crying. The man who once told me at my college graduation that tears were leaking weakness. It was laughable, but by late afternoon, the tone shifted, the concern evaporated, replaced by something sharper, colder. If you do not answer, we will send the police for a wellness check. You are making a mistake. You do not understand the tax implications. You will lose half of it to the IRS if you do not let Dad handle the structure. Then, the summons came. It wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as an olive branch. Meet us at the Capitol Grill. 6 o'clock. Private room. Just us. No lawyers. Let's just be a family and talk this out. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct screaming in my gut told me to stay in the hotel, order room service, and wait for Mr. Vance to handle the legalities. But I needed to know. I needed to see the whites of their eyes. Eleanor had said, when they panic, they show their true selves. I needed to see just how panicked they were. I arrived at the restaurant at 6 sharp. The host led me to a private dining room in the back, away from the prying eyes of the holiday diners. They were waiting. But it wasn't just family. Sitting next to my father was a man I didn't recognize. He was sleek, oily, wearing a suit that was too tight and a watch that was too big. I stopped at the doorway. You said no lawyers, Naomi, my mother exclaimed, standing up and rushing to hug me. I stiffened, not returning the embrace. She smelled of expensive perfume and gin. This isn't a lawyer. Silly. This is Marcus. He is a financial consultant. He is just here to help us understand the numbers. I pulled away from her and sat down. Keeping my coat on, I am not signing anything, I said, looking directly at my father. He smiled. That tight, predatory smile that usually preceded a closing statement. Of course not. We are just talking. Have a drink. I ordered a soda. They were all drinking scotch. Here is the reality. Naomi, the man, Marcus, said. He didn't wait for an introduction. He slid a sleek leather folder across the table. 11 million is a lot of money. But for a single woman with your income history, it is a burden. The taxes, the management fees, the liability, it crushes people like you, people like me, meaning people who actually work for a living. I opened the folder. Inside was a document titled Family Asset Consolidation Trust Agreement. What is this? I asked. It is a solution, my father said, leaning forward. It is a win-win. You transfer $5 million into this trust. The family controls it, meaning I manage the investments. But you are a beneficiary. You keep $6 million for yourself. No questions asked. We welcome you back. We forget this ugly morning, and you get the guidance you need. $5 million, I repeated. You want me to give you $5 million for guidance. Not give, my mother interjected, her voice trembling with forced sincerity. Share. It is about sharing. Natalie? I looked at her. Natalie. She blinked. What, you called me Natalie? My name is Naomi. She waved a hand dismissively. You know what I mean? You are so sensitive. The point is, this money, it was Eleanor's. Yes, but it came from the family originally. It belongs to the Powell legacy. I looked down at the document again. I scanned the legal jargon. It was dense, intentionally confusing, but my time at the compliance firm hadn't been wasted. I spotted the clause on page 3. The trustee, Robert Powell, shall have full discretionary power to allocate funds for the preservation of existing family commercial entities. I looked up. This isn't a trust for me. This is a bailout fund for you. My father's eyes narrowed. Don't be ridiculous. You want me to sign this so you can dump $5 million into Powell and Pine? I said, my voice rising. That is what this is. Why? What is happening with the company? Logan, who had been sullenly swirling the ice in his glass, suddenly spoke up. The bank needs the liquidity. Okay, he snapped. They are calling the loans on the riverfront project. If we don't show a capital injection by the end of the year, they are going to audit the Logan, my father shouted. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Logan's mouth snapped shut. He looked terrified. I sat back, my heart hammering. A loan call, an audit, that was it. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning. Eleanor was right. They were overextended, and they were looking for a life raft. So that is it, I said, feeling a strange calmness wash over me. You don't want me back. You don't want a daughter. You need a co-signer. You need my liquidity to stop the bank from looking at your books. My father's face lost its composure. The mask slipped, revealing the ugly, snarling desperation underneath. You ungrateful little brat, he hissed. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. You think you are special because that old witch left you a pot of gold. You are nothing. You are a clerk. You are nobody without this family. And yet, I said, standing up, you seem to need this nobody's signature very badly. Sit down, my father commanded. You are not leaving until we have an agreement, or what I asked. You will ground me, Marcus. The consultant spoke up, his voice smooth and threatening. Miss Powell, if you walk away, things could get complicated. There are questions about your mental state. Your parents are very concerned. If they were to file a petition for conservatorship, arguing that this sudden wealth has triggered a manic episode, the courts might freeze everything. I stared at him. Then I looked at my mother. She couldn't even meet my eyes. She was inspecting her manicure, but her hand was shaking. You would do that, I asked softly. You would tell a judge, I am crazy just to get control of the money. It is for your own good. Natalie, my mother whispered. See? She did it again. I grabbed my bag. I am leaving, and if you try to stop me, I will scream so loud the diners in the main room will think you are murdering me, and knowing you, Dad, That kind of publicity is the last thing you need right now. I turned and walked out. My father was shouting something behind me, something about duty and ruin, but I didn't stop. I walked straight through the restaurant, out into the cold night air, and hailed the first cab I saw. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I climbed into the back seat. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Vance. Be careful. I just got a call from their firm. They are asking about your medical history. They are building a case for incompetency. Do not engage with them. I looked out the window at the passing city lights. They were really doing it. They were going to try to commit me, or at least destroy my reputation, to get their hands on the cash. They didn't care if they burned me to the ground, as long as they could sift through the ashes for gold. I reached into my bag and my fingers brushed against the heavy, textured paper of the red envelope. Open only if there is a dispute. Well, this was a dispute. This was war. I didn't go back to the hotel immediately. I had the driver take me to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, a place with fluorescent lights and mediocre coffee, where I knew no one would look for me. I sat in a booth in the back, ordered a slice of cherry pie I had no intention of eating, and placed the red envelope on the table. I took a deep breath. I broke the wax seal. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the quiet diner. I pulled out the contents. It wasn't just a letter. It was a stack of documents. On top was a handwritten note from Eleanor. Her handwriting was shaky, likely written in her final weeks, but the words were clear. Naomi, if you are reading this, they have done exactly what I predicted. They have tried to bully you. They have tried to take what is yours. They have shown you that their greed is stronger than their love. I am sorry. I wished I was wrong. But I prepared for this. Do not be afraid of them. They are paper tigers, and you are about to hold the match. Read the journal. Look at the photos. And then, look at the audit report I commissioned before I died. When they panic, they will reveal their nature. But when you reveal the truth, they will have nowhere left to hide. Love, Eleanor. Underneath the note was a small, leather-bound journal and a thick-bound document titled Independent Forensic Audit. Preliminary Inquiry, Powell Pine Holdings. I opened the journal first. It wasn't just Eleanor's thoughts. It was a log. A detailed, dated log of every interaction she had with my parents for the last 20 years. December 25, 2004. Robert called, didn't ask how I was, asked if I had considered selling the lakefront property, told him no. He hung up. Found out later they left Naomi alone while they went skiing. Sent her a card. July 14th, 2012. Cynthia visited, asked for a small loan of $50,000 for home renovations. I know they just bought a boat. I declined. She called me a selfish old bat when she thought I was out of earshot. I flipped through the pages, my heart aching. She had been watching. She had been documenting. But then I got to the audit report. I opened it. I wasn't a forensic accountant, but I knew how to read a balance sheet. And what I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't just that the business was failing. It was fraud. There were loans taken out in names that didn't make sense. There were consulting fees paid to shell companies that seemed to exist only on paper, and then, on page 14, I saw it, a loan guarantee document from 3 years ago, for $200,000, signed by Naomi Powell. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine. It was a decent forgery, but I had never signed it. 3 years ago, I was working entry-level compliance. I didn't have $200,000 to guarantee a ham sandwich, let alone a business loan. My father had used my identity. He had forged my signature to secure credit because his own credit was shot. I felt a wave of nausea, followed quickly by a white-hot rage. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just emotional abuse. This was a felony. He had been using me as a financial prop for years, risking my future, my credit, my freedom, all to keep his house of cards standing. Logan's words in the restaurant echoed in my head. The bank needs the liquidity. The bank is calling the loans. They needed me to sign the trust not just to get the money, but to bury this. If I controlled the money, I might look at the books. If I looked at the books, I would find the fraud. If I found the fraud, my father would go to prison. I closed the folder. My hands were no longer shaking. They wanted to play dirty. They wanted to threaten me with a competency hearing. They wanted to call me crazy. I looked at the documents. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And thanks to Eleanor, I had the means to burn their entire world to the ground. I picked up my phone. I dialed Mr. Vance. It was late, but he answered on the first ring. Naomi. Are you safe? I am safe, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Harder, cold. Did they threaten you? He asked. Yes, I said. But that doesn't matter now. Mr. Vance. I opened the red envelope. There was a pause on the line. Then a long exhale. Okay, what did you find? Everything, I said. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. I am going to need you to bring that to my office first thing in the morning, Vance said, his voice sharpening into professional steel. We need to hire a forensic accountant to verify everything. We are going to need to prepare a defense that doubles as an indictment. No, I said. What, Naomi? You cannot handle this alone. I am not going to handle it alone, I said. But I am not going to do this in a lawyer's office. Not yet. What are you planning? It is Christmas, Mr. Vance, I said, looking at the blinking neon sign of the diner. It is a time for family gatherings, a time for truth. Naomi, do not do anything rash. I am not being rash. I am being traditional. I hung up. I looked down at the forged signature one last time. They wanted a family dinner. Fine. I would give them a dinner they would never forget. I opened my messaging app and created a new group chat. Dad, Mom, Logan. I typed slowly, savoring every letter. I have thought about what you said. You are right. Family should be together on Christmas. I am hosting this year. Come to my apartment tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I will have an answer for you regarding the money. I hit send. Let them think they had won. Let them think I had broken. Let them walk into the trap with smiles on their faces. Because tomorrow night, I wasn't just serving dinner, I was serving justice. And it was going to be served ice cold. Back in the safety of the hotel room. The red envelope felt heavier than the $11 million in my bank account. It sat on the duvet, a silent grenade that Eleanor had pulled the pin on months ago, waiting for me to decide when to throw it. I had already seen the forgery in the diner, my signature, scrawled by my father's hand, guaranteeing a loan I knew nothing about. That single piece of paper had been the catalyst for the text message I had sent, the invitation that was currently sitting in my family's group chat like a ticking clock. But I knew that was just the surface. Eleanor Wren did not do things by halves. If she had left me a weapon, she would have made sure it was fully loaded. I poured myself a glass of tap water, my hands steady now with the cold precision of rage, and dumped the rest of the envelope's contents onto the bed. It was a life in autopsy. There were 3 distinct piles: a stack of photographs, a bundle of printed emails, and a leather-bound journal that smelled of lavender and old dust. I reached for the journal first. It was not a daily diary. It was a logbook of neglect. Eleanor had titled it simply, The Powell Family Traditions. I opened it to a random page from 12 years ago. December 25th, 2011. Called the house. Robert answered. Background noise suggested a party. Asked to speak to Naomi. He said she was unwell and sleeping. Called Naomi's cell 10 minutes later. She was at the university library, studying because the dorms were closed and she had nowhere else to go. They did not tell her about the party. They erased her. I flipped another page. December 24th, 2015. Cynthia sent a Christmas card. It features Robert, herself, and Logan in matching ski gear at Vail. Naomi is not in the photo. Cynthia's note says, "The whole family sends love." I wrote back asking where Naomi was. Cynthia replied 3 weeks later saying there was no room in the cabin. I checked the rental listing. It sleeps 12. Tears pricked my eyes. Not of sadness, but of validation. For years, I had thought I was crazy. I thought I was oversensitive, that I was imagining the exclusion. But Eleanor had been tracking it. She had been building a case file on my childhood trauma. Next were the photographs. They were Polaroids and printed digital shots, clipped together by year. Eleanor had annotated them on the back. One photo showed my parents and Logan at a black tie gala. My mother looked radiant. Logan looked bored. On the back, Eleanor had written Naomi was told this was an adults-only event. The waiter in the background is younger than she is. Another showed a pile of gifts under the tree in the Duluth house. Gifts I bought for Naomi that Robert intercepted. The note read, "He told me he would deliver them. Naomi told me later she received a pair of socks. The iPad and the cashmere sweater never arrived. They had stolen from me. Not just time, not just affection, but actual, physical items sent by the one person who loved me. But the real knife in the gut came from the emails. These were printouts of correspondence between my father and Eleanor. They painted a picture of a man growing increasingly desperate, a man whose public success was a facade held up by debt and delusion. Subject: investment opportunity. Powell and Pine. Date: October 10th, 2020. Eleanor, I know you are conservative with your funds, but this is a sure thing. We are leveraging the commercial district project. I need a bridge loan of $500,000. I can offer you 8% interest. It is better than the bank. Reply October 12th, 2020. Robert, I am not a bank, and I am not a fool. I have seen your leverage ratios. You are building castles on quicksand. If you need money, sell the boat. Sell the Aspen house. Do not come to me. Reply October 12th, 2020. Do not lecture me. You old bat. You have no idea how business works. Just remember who manages your estate when you are gone. We are family. You owe us. You owe us. The entitlement dripped from the page. And then, the final document. The one Mr. Vance had alluded to. It was a formal legal memorandum, drafted by Eleanor and witnessed by Vance. It was titled, Conditional Release of Evidence. I read the clause, and a chill went down my spine. It was a trap, a beautiful, vicious, steel-jawed trap. In the event that the last will and testament of Eleanor Wren is contested by Robert, Cynthia, or Logan Powell, or in the event that Naomi Powell is subjected to undue pressure, harassment, or legal action regarding her inheritance, the executor is hereby authorized to release the attached forensic audit of Powell and Pine Holdings to the State Attorney General's office for immediate review regarding potential fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of financial records. I sat back on the bed, the paper trembling in my hand. Eleanor hadn't just given me money. She had given me a kill switch. If they sued me, they went to prison. If they tried to declare me incompetent, the audit would be released. If they did anything other than smile and accept my charity, their entire house of cards would collapse under the weight of a criminal investigation. The letter she had left for me, the one tucked into the front of the journal, made sense now. My dearest Naomi, I know you are angry. You have every right to be. You will want to hurt them. You will want to scream. But you do not need to seek revenge. You do not need to lower yourself to their level. The truth is a weapon that fires itself. You have spent your whole life trying to save them. You fixed their messes. You kept their secrets. You played the part of the good daughter so they could look perfect. Stop. You do not need to destroy them. You just need to stop saving them from the consequences of their own actions. The audit is your shield. The diary is your sanity. The money is your freedom. Do not let them make you feel small again. You are the giant now. Love, Eleanor. I put the letter down. Stop saving them. That was the key. For 34 years, I had been the buffer. I was the one who smoothed things over, the one who absorbed the tension. Even the forgery, my father had used my name because he knew, subconsciously or not, that I wouldn't fight back. He knew that if the bank came calling, I would probably take the fall to protect the family name. He had weaponized my loyalty. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Mr. Vance again. I picked it up. Mr. Vance, I said, I have read it all. Good, he said. His voice was tired but sharp. Then you understand the position you are in. I understand that my father is a criminal, I said, and I understand that Eleanor has his head in a noose, metaphorically speaking. Vance said hastily. But legally? Yes. The audit she commissioned is damning. The forensic accountant she hired found irregularities going back 5 years. The consulting fees, the shell companies, and the loan guaranteed in your name. That loan, I said, looking at the forgery again. What happens if Powell and Pine defaults? Vance hesitated. If the company goes under, the bank will come after the guarantor. That is you, Naomi. They will come for your assets. They could potentially come for the $11 million you just inherited, arguing that you are liable for the debt. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That is why they want me to put the money in the family trust. I whispered, it is not just to control me, it is to mix the funds. If I put my inheritance into their trust, it becomes available to pay off their bad debts. They are trying to use Eleanor's money to pay off the loan they took out in my name. Exactly, Vance said. They are trying to wash the debt with your inheritance before the bank realizes the signature is fake. If you sign that trust agreement, you are retroactively validating the forgery. You would be accepting the debt as yours. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just greed, it was survival. They were trying to trick me into paying for my own identity theft. We need to move fast, Vance said. I have a forensic accountant on retainer. We need to formalize the findings in the audit. We need to prepare a defense that proves you never signed that document. I am way ahead of you. Mr. Vance, I said. What do you mean I invited them to dinner? I said, Naomi. Vance sighed. I told you I'm not going to sign anything. I interrupted. And I'm not going to let them off the hook. I am going to give them a choice. A choice? They can have their family Christmas, I said, looking at the photo of my 12-year-old self sitting alone by a tree. Or they can have the truth. I need you to bring the forensic accountant to my apartment tomorrow night, I added. Have him wait in the building manager's office downstairs. Or better yet, have him wait in your car. Just be close. Naomi, this is highly irregular. So is stealing your daughter's identity, I snapped. Just be there. Mr. Vance, 7 o'clock, and bring the full audit report. I want the physical copy, the heavy one. I hung up before he could argue further. I looked at the time. It was 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve. I didn't sleep. I spent the rest of the night organizing the evidence. I arranged the photos chronologically. I bookmarked the pages in the diary. I highlighted the lines in the audit report where my name appeared next to money I had never seen. By the time the sun came up over the snowy skyline of St. Paul, the hotel room looked less like a bedroom and more like a war room. I showered, scrubbing the feeling of their betrayal off my skin. I dressed in black, not morning black, tactical black. I checked out of the hotel at 10 a.m. I took a cab to my apartment, a small, tidy one-bedroom that my mother had visited exactly once and called quaint. I had a lot to do. I had to cook. My mother expected a performance. She expected the dutiful daughter to host a holiday meal. Fine. I would give her the performance of a lifetime. I stopped at the grocery store. I bought the most expensive ribeye roast they had. I bought truffles. I bought 3 bottles of vintage Bordeaux that cost more than my first car. I went home and started prepping. I chopped vegetables with a sharp, rhythmic cadence. Chop, 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 at noon. My phone pinged. A text from Logan. So we are actually doing this. Mom is freaking out. She says she doesn't have anything to wear to your place. I typed back. Tell her to wear whatever she wants. It is just family. I smiled as I hit send. Just family. I walked over to the dining table. It was small, round, seating 4. I set 3 places, one for my father, one for my mother, one for Logan. Then, I went to the closet and pulled out a folding chair. I set it at the head of the table. I took the red envelope and placed it on the plate of the folding chair. I took a Sharpie and a piece of cardstock. I wrote a name in bold, black letters, and propped it up against the wine glass at the empty setting. Eleanor. The stage was set. The trap was primed. All I needed now were the rats. I went back to the kitchen to check on the roast. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the small apartment, masking the scent of the burning bridges that were about to light up the night sky. They thought I was the liability. They thought I was the weak link. Tonight, They were going to learn that the chain breaks at the weakest link, but it whips back with enough force to take your head off. I checked the time. 6 hours until dinner. I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine. I toasted the empty chair. To you, Aunt Eleanor. I whispered, and to memory, tonight. Nobody was going to forget a thing. My apartment was small, the kind of place real estate agents described as cozy when they meant cramped. But that night, I had transformed it into a stage. I had moved the sofa against the wall to make room for the rented dining table. I had dimmed the lights to hide the scuff marks on the baseboards. The air smelled of rosemary, expensive red wine, and impending disaster. I had sent the text at noon. I am hosting this year. 7 o'clock. My house. Usually, the Powell family operated on fashionably late time. If an event started at 7, they would roll in at 7:45, expecting the party to pause and pivot around their arrival. But tonight, the doorbell rang at 6:55. They were eager. Desperation had made them punctual. I took a breath, smoothed the front of my black dress, and opened the door. They stood in the hallway like a tableau of the perfect American family. If you ignored the tightness around their eyes, my mother was wearing a white fur coat that probably cost more than my annual rent. She held a bottle of wine like a peace offering. My father stood behind her, clutching a thick leather briefcase with a grip so tight his knuckles were white. And Logan, my brother, the golden boy, was smiling a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. "Merry Christmas," my mother trilled, stepping inside before I could even invite her. She kissed the air next to my cheek, avoiding actual contact. "Oh, Naomi, this place is charming, so intimate." She scanned the living room, her eyes flicking over my IKEA bookshelves with barely concealed disdain. "Hey, sis," Logan said, breezing past me. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of familiarity he had not used since we were toddlers. "You look great, really. Work suits you. Sis." He usually called me Hey or Naomi, or when he thought I wasn't listening. "The buzzkill." "Come in," I said, closing the door behind them. The lock clicked with a sound that felt final. "Can I take your coats?" My father handed me his cashmere overcoat but kept the briefcase. He did not put it down. He carried it into the living room and placed it next to his feet as he sat at the table. "I see you went all out," my father said, nodding at the table setting. "Crystal glasses? Silverware? Where did you rent it?" "I didn't," I said, pouring the wine. "It was Eleanor's. She left it to me." The mention of her name sucked the oxygen out of the room for a second. My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, right. Well, it is nice to keep it in the family. Please, sit," I said. They took their seats. My father at the head, my mother to his right, Logan to his left. They reached for their napkins, and that was when they noticed the fourth chair. I had placed it directly opposite my father. It was a simple folding chair, contrasting sharply with the rented padded ones I had got for them. On the plate sat a single, cream-colored place card with a name written in sharp, black calligraphy, Eleanor. My mother stopped, her hand hovering over her water glass. "Naomi," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What is this?" I sat down in my own chair, positioned between my mother and the empty seat. I picked up my wine glass. "I thought it was only right," I said, looking at the empty chair. "Since she is the one paying for the dinner, and since she is the reason we are all here tonight." My father stared at the card. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "This is macabre. Naomi, take it away. It is disrespectful." "I think forgetting her would be disrespectful," I countered calmly. "But if it bothers you, you can just pretend she is invisible. You are good at that." Logan let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. "Okay, point taken. Can we just eat?" "I am starving." I served the salad. We ate in a silence that was punctuated only by the scrape of silver against china. My mother tried to make small talk about the weather, about the traffic, about a neighbor's divorce. I answered in monosyllables. My father didn't eat. He drank his wine in large, rhythmic gulps, staring at the briefcase by his feet. As soon as I cleared the salad plates, before I could even bring out the roast, My father decided he had waited long enough. He reached down and hoisted the briefcase onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, rattling the silverware. "All right," he said, his voice booming in the small room. "The pleasantries are done. The food is excellent. Naomi, really, but we are not here for the salad." He clicked the latches open. The sound was like a pistol cocking. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. I recognized them immediately. It was the same family asset consolidation trust agreement Marcus had tried to push on me at the restaurant, but it had been rebound in a blue cover. "We need to settle this," my father said, sliding the papers across the table toward me. He placed a heavy gold fountain pen on top of them. "I had the lawyers revise a few clauses to make you feel more comfortable. We increased your monthly allowance from the trust. It is very generous." "Allowance," I repeated, looking at the pen. "I am 34 years old." "Dad, it is a figure of speech," he snapped. "Look, Naomi, we are a family. Families share burdens, and they share windfalls. This money, it is too much for one person to manage, especially someone with no experience. This structure protects you. It protects the legacy." My mother reached out and touched my hand. "Please, honey, just sign it. Then we can have a nice Christmas. We can open presents. We bought you that handbag you liked." Logan chimed in, leaning forward. "Yeah, Naomi? Come on, don't be difficult. It is standard procedure. We are just pooling resources. It makes us stronger." I looked at the three of them. The pleading in my mother's eyes, the arrogance in my father's, the greed in Logan's. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was the same girl who used to wait by the window for them to come home. I picked up the pen. My father's shoulders relaxed. He let out a breath he had been holding. "Good girl. Just sign on the last page." I turned the pen over in my fingers. It was heavy, expensive. "I have a question first," I said. My father stiffened. What question? I looked him directly in the eyes. "How much is the debt?" The room went dead silent. It was a different kind of silence than before. This was the silence of a heart stopping. My mother blinked. "What?" "The debt," I said, my voice steady and clear. "The debt that Powell and Pine Holdings is currently carrying. The debt that made you try to bully me into a trust fund. The debt that has the bank calling you every day. How much is it?" My father laughed, but it sounded like grinding gears. "I don't know what you are talking about. The company is thriving. We are expanding. Don't lie to me." "Dad," I said, "not tonight. Not with Eleanor watching." I gestured to the empty chair. Logan looked at the chair, then back at me, his face pale. "Naomi, seriously, stop it. Is it $5 million, I asked. "Is that why you wanted the buy-in? Or is it more? Is it 10? Is the $11 million? Eleanor left me the only thing standing between you and bankruptcy court." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough," he roared. "Who have you been talking to? That hack lawyer Vance? He doesn't know anything about high-level finance. He knows enough to know what a desperate man looks like." I said. I stood up. I walked over to the side of the room where I had set up a small table with a white cloth draped over it. Underneath the cloth was my laptop and a portable projector I had borrowed from the office. "You want to talk about family legacy?" I said. "You want to talk about sharing? Okay, let's share." I pulled the cloth off. My mother gasped. "Naomi, what are you doing?" I hit the power button. The projector hummed to life. A beam of bright blue light cut through the dim room, hitting the blank white wall behind the dining table. The image focused. It was a title slide. Giant, black letters on a white background. "Independent Forensic Audit, Preliminary Findings. Subject Powell Pine Holdings, prepared for the estate of Eleanor Wren." My father stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "Turn that off," he snarled. I didn't. I clicked the remote. The slide changed. Slide 2, Unauthorized Diversion of Funds. It showed a flowchart of money leaving the company accounts and moving into shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. Slide 3, Falsified Loan Applications. "Turn it off," my father shouted. Moving around the table. He looked dangerous now. His face was red, his veins bulging. "That is confidential corporate information. You stole that." I clicked again. Slide 4. The guarantor. The image on the wall was blown up to 4 feet wide. It was a scan of a loan guarantee document, and right there, at the bottom, highlighted in a red box, was the signature, Naomi Powell. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Oh my God. I looked at my father. He had stopped moving. He was staring at the wall, at the forgery he had committed 3 years ago. You stole my name, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. You used me to guarantee a loan for $200,000. If the company goes under, the bank comes for me. That is why you need the trust. You need to use Eleanor's money to pay off the debt you put in my name before anyone finds out. My father turned to me. His eyes were wild. You don't understand. He pleaded, his voice cracking. It was just a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a signature. And you were not around. I wasn't around. I yelled. I was in the same city. You just didn't think I mattered enough to ask? Or maybe you knew I would say no to fraud. Logan stood up. Naomi, listen, we can fix this. Just turn off the projector. We can use the inheritance to clear the loan. And nobody has to know. Nobody has to know, I laughed bitterly. That is your solution. Cover it up. My father lunged. He didn't move like an old man. He moved with the desperate speed of a trapped animal. He came around the table, his hand reaching for the remote control in my hand. Give me that, he screamed. I stepped back, but I was cornered against the bookshelf. Robert, stop, my mother screamed. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was bruising. Give it to me. Naomi, you are ruining everything. The bedroom door behind me opened. Drop the remote. Mr. Powell. The voice was calm, baritone, and authoritative. My father froze. He looked up. Standing in the doorway to my bedroom was Mr. Vance, and behind him, looking terrified but resolute, was a man holding a laptop bag, the forensic accountant. Who the hell are you? My father spat. Though he released my wrist. My name is Vance. I am the executor of the estate you are trying to plunder. Mr. Vance stepped into the living room. He was holding his phone up. The red light of the recording app was glowing. You are trespassing, my father growled, straightening his jacket. Get out of my daughter's apartment. I was invited. Mr. Vance said coolly, unlike the fraud you brought to the table. He walked over and stood next to me. Mr. and Mrs. Powell, he said, you have the right to remain silent. In fact, I would strongly suggest it, because as of 7 o'clock this evening, this entire dinner party is being recorded as evidence in a criminal investigation regarding identity theft, bank fraud, and elder abuse. My mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands. Not fake tears this time. Real, terrified sobs. Logan backed away until he hit the wall. I didn't sign anything. He stammered. I didn't know. I swear. My father looked at the projector screen, then at me, then at Vance. The fight drained out of him, leaving him looking old and shrunken. Naomi, he whispered. You would send your own father to prison over money. I looked at him. I looked at the red mark on my wrist where he had grabbed me. I looked at the empty chair where Eleanor should have been. It is not about the money. Dad, I said, I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. It is about the cost. And the bill just came due. Christmas Day broke over St. Paul not with a choir of angels, but with a screech of legal tires. I woke up on my couch, still wearing the black dress from the night before, wrapped in a blanket Mr. Vance had thrown over me before he left at 3 a.m. My apartment felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene where the illusion of my family had been brutally murdered. At 8 o'clock in the morning, while most families were unwrapping presents and drinking coffee, my phone alerted me that the war had moved from my dining table to the court of public opinion. Mr. Vance called first. Merry Christmas, Naomi, he said, his voice grim. I hope you are sitting down. They didn't wait. They filed an emergency petition at the courthouse. They found a judge willing to hear an urgent motion on a holiday. I rubbed my eyes. On what grounds undue influence and mental incapacity? Vance replied, They are claiming Eleanor was not in her right mind when she signed the new will. And here's the kicker: they are claiming you manipulated her while isolating her from the rest of the family. They are asking for a temporary injunction to freeze the assets. I walked to the window. The city looked peaceful under a fresh layer of snow. But down below, I could see the black SUV parked across the street. My father's driver. They were watching me. "Let them file," I said, my voice raspy. "We have the video of the signing. We have the audit. We do." Vance agreed. "But that takes time to process. In the meantime, they are trying to break you. Don't go on social media." Of course, that was the first thing I did. I opened Facebook, my feed, usually filled with pictures of friends' babies and holiday meals, was a war zone. My mother had been busy. She hadn't posted directly on her wall that would be too gauche. Instead, she had called my aunts, my cousins, the women she played bridge with. The flying monkeys were out in full force. So sad to hear about the Powell family crisis. My Aunt Linda wrote, "Money really does change people. Praying for Naomi to find her way back to the light. Greed is a terrible disease. Heartbroken for Robert and Cynthia." Another family friend posted, "To raise a child with so much love only to have her turn on you when she smells cash, it is a tragedy. Mental health issues are real." People. Then I saw Logan's contribution. He had posted a photo of the three of them, Mom, Dad, and himself, sitting in front of their tree, looking somber and devastated. The caption was a masterclass in vague booking. "Sad Christmas this year." Sometimes the people you try to protect the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Mental instability is scary. We just want our sister back. We don't care about the money. We just want her to get help. Family first. Pray for Naomi. The comments were a cesspool of sympathy for them and judgment for me. "Stay strong, Logan. She needs rehab, not a bank account. Ungrateful." I threw the phone onto the cushion. They were painting me as the unstable, greedy daughter who had swooped in to steal from a senile old woman. It was the perfect narrative. It played into every stereotype. The quiet one who snaps. I paced the small living room. The projector screen was still up, a blank white canvas. The audit report was locked in my safe. Mr. Vance texted me an hour later. "They got the temporary freeze, limited scope. You cannot liquidate the main portfolio, but the charitable trust is still yours. We have a hearing on the 30th. They were trying to starve me out." They knew I didn't have the cash on hand to fight a protracted legal battle. They thought that if they cut off the supply, I would come crawling back to sign their settlement. But they forgot one thing: I had been living on a shoebox budget my entire life. I knew how to survive on ramen and spite. They were the ones who couldn't last a month without liquidity. By noon, the attacks escalated from digital to physical. My buzzer rang. I checked the monitor. It was my mother. She was alone this time, looking small and fragile in the grainy black and white camera feed. "Naomi, please." Her voice came through the speaker, tinny and distorted. "I just want to talk. No lawyers, no men, just mother and daughter. I brought leftovers." I stared at her image. Part of me, the part that was 12 years old and waking up alone under the Christmas tree, wanted to let her in, wanted to believe that she was a victim of my father's ambition. But then I remembered the text messages she had sent the night before. "You are dead to us." I pressed the talk button. "Go away. Mom, Naomi, don't be like this. Dad is spiraling. He is talking about things that scare me. We can fix this. Just come downstairs. We can sit in the car. It is warm." The car. The isolated, soundproof environment where they could pressure me without witnesses. "I am not coming down," I said, "and if you don't leave, I am calling the police for harassment. Mr. Vance has already alerted the precinct." She looked up at the camera. The fragile mask dropped instantly. Her face twisted into a sneer that was pure hatred. "You selfish little bitch," she hissed. "You are going to ruin us all." I released the button. The screen went black. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't manic. I was heartbroken. But heartbreak is a fuel if you burn it correctly. At 2 p.m, the forensic accountant, a man named David who spoke in hushed tones and wore wire-rimmed glasses, sent me an encrypted email. Naomi, look at page 42 of the audit again. I found something new. I opened the file on my laptop. Page 42 detailed the consulting fees that were draining the Powell and Pine accounts. I traced the shell company receiving the fees. David's email continued. It is called Aurora Consulting. It is registered in Nevada. But look at the disbursement dates. I looked. The dates were specific. December 26th, 2018, December 27th, 2019, December 28th, 2020, every year, right after Christmas. A massive chunk of cash left the company. They aren't just skimming profits, David wrote. These look like hush money payments, or debt servicing for something off the books. And here's the strange part. The payments stopped this year. They missed the scheduled transfer yesterday. That explained the panic. That explained the rush to get my signature. They had a payment due, and the coffers were empty. I was staring at the screen, trying to make sense of the pattern. When my personal cell phone rang, it was an unknown number. I hesitated. I had been ignoring unknown numbers all day, assuming they were reporters or flying monkeys, but this one had a local area code. I answered it. Hello, is this Naomi Powell? A woman's voice, low, smoky, sounding like she had been crying or smoking, or both. Yes. Who is this? You don't know me, but I used to work for your father. I was his executive assistant from 2015 to 2019. My grip on the phone tightened. Why are you calling me? I saw the Facebook post, she said. The one your brother made. About you being unstable. About you needing help. She let out a dry, hacking laugh. It is funny. That is the exact same thing they said about me when they fired me. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? Your father runs a tight ship. Naomi, but it leaks. I know about the audit. I know what you found, but the audit only shows you the numbers. It doesn't show you the why. Who are you? I asked again. My name is Sarah. Sarah Miller. Look, I don't want to get involved. I signed an NDA that is tighter than a drum. If they find out I talked to you, they will sue me into oblivion. Then why call because I have something of yours? Or rather, something that explains you. What is it? Can you meet me, she asked. Not your place. They are watching it. Do you know the parking garage behind the old Macy's building, the one on 4th Street? That sounds like a scene from a bad movie where the girl gets murdered, I said bluntly. Fair point. Sarah said, Okay, how about the public library? The downtown branch. It is closed for the holiday, but the vestibule is unlocked for returns. It is glass, visible from the street. I looked at the clock. It was 4 o'clock. The sun was already starting to set. Okay, I said. 30 minutes. I put on a hat and a heavy scarf, covering most of my face. I slipped out the back exit of my apartment building, through the laundry room and into the alley, bypassing the black SUV parked out front. I walked the 10 blocks to the library, the cold wind biting at my face. The city was deserted. When I got to the library, a woman was standing inside the glass vestibule. She was wrapped in a beige trench coat, shivering slightly. She looked to be in her late 30s, tired, with dark circles under her eyes. I tapped on the glass. She jumped, then opened the door. Naomi, she asked. I nodded. Sarah. She looked around nervously. We have to be quick. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. What is this? I asked. Taking it, it felt cold in my palm. When I left the company when I was forced out, I made a backup. She said, I thought I might need it for insurance. I never used it. I was too scared. But watching them do this to you, seeing them play the victim, I couldn't stomach it. What is on it? Emails. Sarah said. Internal memos. But not the business kind. These are personal. Between your father and your mother. And some correspondence with a clinic in Switzerland. Switzerland, I frowned. Naomi, she said, stepping closer. Her eyes were intense, filled with a mixture of pity and fear. Have you ever wondered why they forgot you? Specifically at Christmas because they didn't care. I said, because I was boring. No, Sarah shook her head. They didn't forget you because you were boring. They forgot you because you were a liability. I don't understand. It is on the drive, she said. But the short version. Every Christmas, your father hosts a very specific type of investor meeting. It is off the books. It is where the real money comes from, the dirty money, the money that flows to that shell company in Nevada. I stared at her. And they couldn't have you there, she whispered, because you notice things. You have always been the observer, the quiet one in the corner. Logan, he is dumb as a rock. He sees what they tell him to see. But you see the cracks. She looked over my shoulder at a passing car. Your father called you the witness in the emails. Sarah said, not your name. Just the witness. I felt the blood drain from my face. The witness. They needed you gone during the holidays so they could conduct their business without you asking questions. She said, the neglect, the leaving you at home, it wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. It was a quarantine. She backed away toward the door. There is one more thing, she said. That signature. The one on the loan guarantee. I nodded. It is a forgery. It is worse than a forgery. Sarah said, look at the date on the document. Then look at your medical records from that year. Specifically, the dental surgery you had that December, what you were under general anesthesia when that document was signed. Naomi, they didn't just forge it. They brought the notary into the recovery room while you were groggy. They guided your hand. I felt like I was going to vomit. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. Check the drive, Sarah said. It is all there. The email setting up the notary appointment. The joke your father made about you being pliable. She pushed open the door. Good luck, Naomi. Burn them down. She walked out into the snow and disappeared around the corner. I stood in the vestibule for a long time, clutching the silver USB drive. It wasn't just that they didn't love me. It wasn't just that they preferred Logan. I was an obstacle. I was a surveillance camera they had to tape over every December so they could commit their crimes in peace. They forgot me to protect themselves. I walked back to my apartment. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I went upstairs, ignoring the black SUV that was still parked outside. I locked the door. I sat down at my computer. I plugged in the drive. A folder popped up. Project Silent Night. I opened the first file. It was an email from my father to my mother. Dated 12 years ago. Subject, Christmas logistics. Cynthia, make sure Naomi is left behind this year. The investors from the cartel are coming on the 24th. I don't want her staring at them with those big eyes. She remembers faces. Tell her we forgot to buy her a ticket. She is used to it. Reply. She will cry. Reply. Let her cry. Better she cries than she talks. I read through them. Dozens of them. Years of calculated abandonment. And then I found the document Sarah mentioned. The medical incident. Subject, the signature. Date December 21st, 2018. The notary is set for 2 p.m. Naomi will be coming out of wisdom teeth surgery at 1:45. She will be high as a kite. Just put the pen in her hand. Tell her it is discharge paperwork. She will sign anything. I remembered that surgery. I remembered waking up groggy, my mouth full of cotton. I remembered my father standing over me, smiling, holding a clipboard. I remembered him saying, just sign here, honey, so we can take you home. I had signed my own death warrant while high on anesthesia, and he had held the pen. I closed the laptop. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Last chance. Naomi, the offer stands until midnight. $5 million for the family, and we drop the competency petition, or we destroy you in court on the 30th. I looked at the text. I didn't reply. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance, I said. Naomi, it is Christmas night. I know. I said, I need you to add a name to the witness list for the hearing on the 30th. Who? A dental surgeon. I said, and a notary public. Naomi, what is going on? I found out why they forgot me. Mr. Vance, and I found out how they got the signature. I looked at the silver drive. And I am not just going to win this hearing. I said, I am going to send them to federal prison. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked down at the black SUV. Merry Christmas, Dad, I whispered. Enjoy your last one as a free man. The digital glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my apartment. Outside, the city of St. Paul was buried under fresh snow. sleeping off the exhaustion of Christmas Day. But inside, I was wide awake, dissecting the anatomy of my own erasure. The USB drive Sarah had given me was not just a storage device, it was a black box recorder from the crash site of my childhood. I had spent hours reading the emails, organizing them by date, cross-referencing them with my memory. For decades, I had carried the heavy, wet blanket of belief that I was simply unlovable. I thought I was too quiet, too serious, too plain to compete with the bright, shiny charisma of my brother Logan or the social ambition of my parents. I thought they left me behind because they simply did not enjoy my company. I was wrong. It was not personal. It was logistical. I opened a file titled Holiday Protocol 2019. The email was from my father to the family's longtime accountant, a man I had met only once. Subject: The Year-End Gala. Date November 14th, 2019. We are locking in the guest list for the Christmas Eve mixer. The Japanese investors are confirmed. We need to project total stability. I am bringing Logan. He charms the wives and looks the part of the heir. Keep Naomi away. She asks too many questions. Last time she was in the room, she asked about the zoning permits on the riverfront project. We cannot have a liability like that wandering around with a glass of wine. Tell her we are doing a parents-only retreat this year. I stared at the word, liability. I was not a daughter. I was a risk factor. I scrolled down to another email. This one between my father and my mother. Subject: Re. She is crying again. Date December 23rd, 2015. Let her cry. Cynthia. It is better she sits at home feeling sorry for herself than standing in the ballroom remembering things she shouldn't. The girl has a memory like a trap. If she talks to the auditors about the vacation home write-offs, we are finished. Keep her isolated until January 2nd. A memory like a trap. I sat back in my chair, a cold, hard laugh escaping my lips. He was right. I did have a memory like a trap, and he had just walked right into it. They had constructed a seasonal quarantine around me. The forgetfulness, the left-behind moments, the miscommunications, it was all a calculated strategy to keep the witness off the stand during the weeks when they were committing their most flagrant financial crimes. They needed the holidays to look perfect, because that was when they closed their darkest deals. And my presence was the one variable they could not control. I printed the emails, every single one of them. The next morning, December 26th, the world went back to work, and so did I. I met Mr. Vance and David, the forensic accountant, at Vance's office. I did not go alone. I hired a private security detail to drive me, 2 large men in a black sedan. If my family wanted to play mobster games, I would dress for the part. David had the physical copy of the audit spread out on the conference table. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed behind his glasses. We have a problem with the signature, David said, skipping the pleasantries. I know. I said, I told you. They forged it. It is more complex than a simple forgery, David corrected. He slid a high-resolution scan across the table. This is the loan guarantee document, he explained, pointing to the scrawl at the bottom, and these he pointed to a stack of checks and contracts are samples of your actual signature from that same year. He pulled out a magnifying glass. Look at the pressure points, David said. When a person signs their name naturally, the pen flows. There is a rhythm. The pressure is consistent. He tapped the loan document. Here, the line is shaky. The pressure spikes and drops. It looks like a seismograph of an earthquake. This is what we call an assisted signature. It happens when someone is guiding another person's hand, or when the signer is under extreme duress or intoxication. I felt a phantom taste of cotton and blood in my mouth, the memory of the wisdom teeth surgery. They held my hand. I whispered. I was high on anesthesia. My father held the pen and dragged my hand across the paper. David nodded grimly. That matches the forensic evidence. And combined with the email you found about the notary appointment being scheduled for your recovery time, we have them dead to rights. This is not just fraud, Naomi. This is battery. This is criminal coercion. Mr. Vance leaned forward, his hands clasped. We have enough to destroy them. Naomi. But we need to be strategic. If we reveal the USB drive now, they might claim it was obtained illegally. They might try to suppress it. So what do? I asked. We trigger the nuclear option, Vance said. We file a countersuit. He opened a file folder. We are not just defending you against the competency hearing anymore. We are filing a petition for full forensic discovery. We are arguing that since they have accused you of financial incompetence regarding the estate, the court must examine the financial history of the entire Powell family to establish a baseline of competent management. I smiled. It was brilliant. To prove I was bad with money, they had to prove they were good with it, which means, I said, they have to open the books of Powell and Pine. Everything. Vance confirmed. Every receipt, every email, every offshore transfer. And if they refuse, they are in contempt of court. File it. I said, Mr. Vance filed the motion at 10 o'clock that morning. By 2 in the afternoon. The reaction hit. My phone did not ring. My parents were too smart for that now. They knew I was recording. Instead, a courier arrived at Mr. Vance's office with a sealed letter from my father's legal team. Vance opened it, read it, and then looked at me with raised eyebrows. They are panicking, he said. Read it. I said, Dear Mr. Vance, our clients, the Powell family, wish to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding privately, without the need for a protracted public spectacle that would damage the reputation of all parties involved. They are prepared to drop the petition for conservatorship and acknowledge the validity of Eleanor Wren's will immediately. Furthermore, as a gesture of good faith and to reintegrate Naomi into the family enterprise, they are offering to transfer 10% of the equity in Powell and Pine Holdings to Naomi Powell, effectively making her a partner. In exchange, all current motions will be withdrawn, and a non-disclosure agreement regarding family business practices will be signed. I laughed. It was a loud, sharp sound that startled the receptionist outside the glass walls. 10%, I asked. They are offering me 10% of a sinking ship. They are offering you a bribe to keep the books closed, David said dryly. And 10% of nothing is still nothing. If that company is as leveraged as I think it is, that equity is actually a liability. Vance looked at me. What is your response? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen Mississippi River. Tell them no, I said. Just no. Tell them I do not want their money, I said, turning back to face them. Tell them I do not want a seat at their table. Tell them I do not want a piece of the company. I paused, letting the words settle. Tell them I want the truth. I want the books opened. I want a public admission of the forgery. And I want my name off that loan. Vance nodded and began drafting the reply. But there was one more card to play, one that even I did not know about until that moment. There is something else, Vance said, hesitating slightly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file I had not seen before. It was old, yellowed at the edges. This was in Eleanor's safe deposit box. Vance said, It wasn't part of the red envelope because technically, it is not part of the estate distribution. It is a separate asset entirely. I sat back down. What is it? Vance opened the file. 6 years ago, Powell and Pine Holdings was in trouble. Real trouble. They had a liquidity crisis, and no bank would touch them. So, your father went to the secondary lending market. He took out a high-risk private loan for $2 million to cover a margin call. I nodded. That sounds like him. The lender was a shell corporation called North Star Ventures. Vance continued. Okay. So Vance pushed the document toward me. North Star Ventures was fully owned by Eleanor Wren. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. Eleanor, I whispered. Eleanor lent them the money. She bought their debt, Vance corrected. She didn't lend it directly. She bought the note from the original distressed lender. Your father never knew. He thought he was paying interest to some faceless hedge fund in New York. He has been sending checks, or rather, missing checks to North Star Ventures for 6 years. I looked at the paperwork. It was a promissory note, secured by the voting shares of Powell and Pine Holdings. And here's the interesting part, Vance said, a small smile playing on his lips. Since you inherited Eleanor's entire estate, including her business interests, I own North Star Ventures. I finished. And by extension, Vance said, you own the debt of Powell and Pine. David, the accountant, grabbed the paper and scanned the terms. He let out a low whistle. Naomi, look at the default clause, David said, pointing to paragraph 4. In the event of a missed payment exceeding 60 days, the lender has the right to demand immediate repayment of the full principal sum. If the borrower cannot pay, the lender has the right to convert the debt into controlling equity. David looked up at me, his eyes wide. They missed the payment in November, David said, and they missed the one in December. That is why they were desperate for your inheritance money. They were trying to pay off this specific loan before the faceless lender came collecting. They didn't know the lender was me. I said, the irony was suffocating. My father had been terrorizing me, abusing me, and stealing my identity to get money to pay me. You are not just a plaintiff. Naomi, Vance said quietly, you are the senior creditor. You don't need a court order to see the books. You have the right to audit them as the lien holder. You have the right to force a restructuring. You have the right to force them into involuntary bankruptcy. I picked up the document. It felt lighter than the others, but it carried more weight. This was the checkmate. Eleanor hadn't just given me a shield. She had given me the keys to their kingdom. So, Vance asked, how do you want to play this? The hearing for the temporary injunction is set for December 30th. I looked at the calendar on the wall. 4 days. We go to the hearing. I said, but you could end this now. Vance said, you could call the loan today. You could seize the company before the weekend. No, I said firmly. If I do that, they will spin it. They will say I am a vulture who swooped in to kill the family business. They will play the victim card in the press. They will say I destroyed them out of spite. I stood up, clutching the promissory note. I want it on the record. I said, I want a judge to hear the forensic evidence. I want the forgery entered into legal history. I want the world to know that they didn't fall because of bad luck or a mean daughter. I want the world to know they fell because they were criminals. Set the hearing. I told Vance. December 30th. I walked out of the office and into the biting cold of the parking lot. The security guards fell in step behind me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Logan. Take the deal. Naomi, seriously, Dad is losing it. He is talking about burning the files. Just take the 10% and let it go. I looked at the snowflakes melting on the screen. Burning the files. Of course he was. I typed a reply to Logan. Tell him not to bother with the matches. I already have the smoke. I got into the car. Where to? Miss Powell, the driver asked. Home, I said. I have a dress to iron. I spent the next 3 days in isolation. I didn't answer the door. I didn't answer the phone. I let the rumors swirl. I let my mother cry to the tabloids, and yes, by day 2, there were reporters camped out on the sidewalk. They ran headlines like heiress horror daughter evicts parents from Christmas and the $11 million betrayal. I let them talk. Silence is a vacuum. And my family rushed to fill it with noise, making themselves look more erratic with every interview. On the night of the 29th, I sat in my living room. The projector was gone. The table was back to its normal size. I took out the red envelope one last time. It was empty now. Every secret had been deployed. Every weapon had been fired. I looked at the photo of Eleanor. She looked stern, unsmiling, but her eyes were kind. Consequences. She had said, stop saving them from consequences. Tomorrow. I would walk into a courtroom. I wouldn't be the little girl waiting for a ride. I wouldn't be the liability. I wouldn't be the ghost. I would be the woman who owned the debt, and I was going to collect. The courtroom in the Ramsey County Courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on December 30th, outside. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees below zero. But inside courtroom 4B, the heat was suffocating. My parents and Logan sat at the plaintiff's table. They had dressed for a funeral. My mother wore a modest black suit and no jewelry, a calculated attempt to look humble and victimized. My father wore a gray suit that was slightly ill-fitting, likely chosen to make him appear diminished, a patriarch broken by the cruelty of an ungrateful child. Logan just looked at his shoes. Judge Harrison, a woman with steel gray hair and a reputation for having zero tolerance for theatrics, looked over her spectacles at the assembly. "We are here on an emergency motion regarding the estate of Eleanor Wren," she said. "The plaintiffs allege undue influence and mental incapacity regarding the beneficiary, Naomi Powell. Mr. Stone, you may proceed." Their lawyer stood up. He was a theatrical man who moved with the rehearsed grace of a stage actor. "Your Honor," he began, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "this is a tragedy. We have here parents who have devoted their lives to raising a daughter, supporting her, loving her. And what is their reward when a confused, elderly relative leaves a significant sum of money that originated from the family's collective labor this daughter, in a fit of manic greed, cuts them off?" He gestured to me. "Naomi Powell has a history of instability. She has isolated herself. She has turned against the very people who gave her life. We are not asking for the money for ourselves, Your Honor. We are asking for the court to step in and protect the assets before a mentally compromised young woman destroys her family's legacy. It is a matter of filial piety. It is a matter of moral duty." My mother dabbed her dry eyes with a tissue. My father shook his head sorrowfully. "It was a perfect performance. If I did not know them, I would have believed it myself." Mr. Vance stood up. He did not pace. He did not shout. He walked to the podium with a thick binder under his arm. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "we are not here to debate philosophy or filial piety. We are here to look at facts, and the fact is, the plaintiffs are not heartbroken. They are insolvent." "Objection, Mr. Stone shouted. "Overruled," the judge said. "Get to the point. Mr. Vance." Mr. Vance opened the binder. The plaintiffs claim that Naomi Powell was loved, supported, and included. They claim her current behavior is a sudden, unexplained break from reality. "We would like to submit Exhibit A." He handed a stack of documents to the bailiff. "These are excerpts from the personal journals of the deceased, Eleanor Wren, as well as a photographic log dating back 20 years. Judge Harrison flipped through the pages. Mr. Vance continued. "As you can see, Your Honor, the loving family described by the plaintiffs has a 2-decade history of systematic exclusion. Here is a photo from Christmas 2005. Naomi is absent. The parents are in Aspen. Naomi was left in a boarding kennel, metaphorically speaking, at a friend's house. Here is a journal entry from 2012 detailing how they forgot to tell her the time of the family dinner." My father's face hardened. "That is irrelevant," he snapped from his seat. "Family squabbles are not legal evidence." Mr. Vance ignored him. "If the court pleases, we would like to address the claim of instability. The plaintiffs argue that Naomi Powell is paranoid. They claim she imagines conspiracies against her." Vance pulled the silver USB drive from his pocket. He held it up. "We obtained this evidence from a former employee of Powell and Pine Holdings. It contains internal email correspondence between Robert Powell, Cynthia Powell, and their accounting team." My father went rigid. He recognized the drive. "Your Honor," Vance said, "I would like to read an email dated November 14th, 2019. Subject line, the year-end gala." He put on his reading glasses. "Keep Naomi away. She asks too many questions. We cannot have a liability like that wandering around. Tell her we are doing a parents-only retreat." The courtroom went silent. Mr. Vance looked at my father. "They did not forget her, Your Honor. They quarantined her. They referred to their daughter as a liability because she was the only one in the family who was not complicit in their financial irregularities." My mother let out a gasp. "That is private correspondence." "It is evidence of motive," Judge Harrison said coldly. "Continue, Counselor." Mr. Vance nodded to the back of the room. "I call David Ross, forensic accountant, to the stand." David walked up, swore in, and sat down. He looked like the grim reaper of mathematics. "Mr. Ross," Vance asked, "in your analysis of the documents provided by the estate, did you find any financial anomalies connecting the plaintiffs to the defendant?" "Yes," David said. He pulled up a blown-up image on the courtroom projector. "This is a loan guarantee for $200,000, executed 3 years ago. It bears the signature of Naomi Powell." "And did Naomi Powell sign this?" Vance asked. David shook his head. "Forensic handwriting analysis confirms it is an assisted signature, likely obtained while the signer was impaired. Furthermore, hospital records show Miss Powell was in recovery from oral surgery at the exact time this document was notarized." Judge Harrison leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at my father. "You forged your daughter's signature to secure a loan." My father stood up. "It was a bridge loan. I had power of attorney. I was protecting the business. Sit down." "Mr. Powell," the judge barked. David continued, his voice monotone and devastating. "We also found a pattern of payments labeled consulting fees, leaving the Powell and Pine accounts every December 26th. These funds were transferred to a shell company in Nevada called Aurora Consulting. The total amount embezzled over 5 years exceeds $1 million. My mother was shaking now. She gripped Logan's arm. Logan looked like he was about to be sick. "The plaintiffs are not here because they are worried about Naomi's mental health," Vance concluded. "They are here because the payments stopped. They are here because the bank is calling the loans. They are here because they need Naomi's inheritance to cover the crimes they committed in her name." My father's face was a mask of red fury. He stood up again, ignoring his lawyer's attempt to restrain him. "She is my daughter," he shouted, his voice echoing off the wood paneling. "It is family money. If she is a good person, she would share. She would help us." The courtroom froze. All eyes turned to me. I stood up slowly. I felt incredibly calm. The fear that had defined my life for 34 years was gone, evaporated by the heat of the truth. I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had left me alone under a tree when I was 12. I looked at the man who had called me a liability. "I did share. Dad," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. He blinked. "What I shared the truth," I said. Then, I turned to Mr. Vance. "Play the card." Vance nodded. He picked up the final document, the yellowed file from Eleanor's safe deposit box. "Your Honor, there is one final piece of evidence regarding the financial standing of the plaintiffs." He handed the paper to the judge. 6 years ago, Powell and Pine Holdings sold a distressed debt note to a private entity called North Star Ventures. The value of the note is $2 million. The terms state that in the event of default, the lender has the right to seize controlling equity in the company. My father frowned. "So what? We owe North Star. We will pay them when we get the trust money." "Mr. Vance smiled. It was a shark smile. "Mr. Powell, North Star Ventures was a holding company fully owned by Eleanor Wren. Upon her death, all assets of North Star Ventures transferred to her sole beneficiary." My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "That is right," Vance said. "Naomi Powell is not just your daughter. She is not just the defendant. She is your senior creditor. You have missed 2 payments. She now owns the debt, and per the terms of the contract, she has the right to demand immediate repayment or seize the company assets today." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. My father slumped back into his chair. My mother put her face in her hands. Logan just stared at the ceiling, as if looking for an escape hatch. Eleanor hadn't just left me money. She had bought the rope they were using to hang themselves, and she had put the end of it in my hand. Judge Harrison took off her glasses. She looked at the plaintiffs with an expression of pure disgust. "The petition to contest the will is denied with prejudice," she ruled. "The temporary injunction on Miss Powell's assets is lifted immediately. Furthermore, given the evidence of forgery and embezzlement presented by the defense, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for a criminal investigation." She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "Court is adjourned." The bailiff moved toward my father. Mr. Stone, the lawyer, was already packing his briefcase, trying to distance himself from his clients. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was bright and echoing. I heard footsteps behind me. "Naomi." I stopped and turned. My mother was hurrying after me. Her eyes were wild. Her makeup smeared. She stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. "How could you?" she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "We are your parents. We gave you everything. And you destroy us. You send your father to prison." I looked at her. I looked for a shred of the mother I had wanted when I was a child. I saw nothing but a stranger who had lost her ATM card. "I didn't destroy you, Mom," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You are cruel." She spat. "You are a cold, cruel girl. You will die alone, Naomi, just like Eleanor." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a small, flat box. "I have one last Christmas present for you," I said. I held it out. She stared at it suspiciously. "What is it? Open it." She took the box. Her hands were shaking. She lifted the lid. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a page from a Hello Kitty diary, dated 22 years ago. She read it. "December 25th. I woke up and they were gone. There was no food. I ate green beans cold. I waited all day. They never called. Today they forgot me. Again." She looked up at me. Her face was pale. "I didn't forget," I said. I turned around. "Naomi." She screamed after me. "Naomi, wait." I walked down the long marble hallway. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the winter air. The snow was falling softly, covering the dirty city in a clean white blanket. I took a deep breath. The air was cold, sharp, and incredibly sweet. I had $11 million. I had a company to restructure. I had a foundation to run. But most importantly, for the first time in 34 years, I didn't have to wait for anyone to come home. I was already there. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. If you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a drama. I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from right now? Are you at work, at the gym, or maybe hiding from your own family drama? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones bite back the hardest. See you in the next video.